Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Unsolved Mystery Series, Episode 86. Today we're diving deep into a case that really shook India back in 2009. The tragic death of Aman Kachroo, a young medical student.
Yeah.
This isn't just a story about one life lost, but about a deeply rooted issue in India's education system, ragging.
Right.
You might be wondering, what exactly is ragging?
Well, it's essentially a form of hazing,
Yeah.
often brutal and humiliating, inflicted by senior students on their juniors, especially in colleges. We're talking about verbal abuse, physical assaults, even forced compliance to ridiculous and dangerous demands, all designed to assert dominance and control.
Oh, wow.
Sadly, this practice has been a part of the culture in some Indian institutions for far too long.
And Aman's case, unfortunately, brought this dark side of college life to the forefront
Yeah.
to really grasp the impact of what happened.
Right?
Let's first get to know Aman as a person, beyond the headlines.
Okay.
So, who was Aman?
Aman was a bright, compassionate 19-year-old with the dream of becoming a doctor. He was known for his kindness, his desire to help others, and a strong sense of justice. Those who knew him describe him as someone who truly believed he could make a difference in the world.
It's sad to think that, he had such big dreams
Yeah,
and such a good heart, it seems like, and it was all cut short.
absolutely.
His family background seems to have played a significant role in shaping his character, right?
Yes, Aman grew up in a family that highly valued education
Okay.
and instilled in him a strong sense of social responsibility. It's heartbreaking to think of the potential that was lost that night.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that night, can you take us back to March 7th, 2009, and paint a picture of what happened to Aman?
That night, Aman and several other first-year students were summoned
Okay.
for what's known as a ragging session
Okay.
by a group of senior students. These sessions were sadly not uncommon,
Oh, wow.
but this one took a horrific turn. The senior students involved were reportedly heavily intoxicated, and the accounts from witnesses describe a brutal and terrifying scene.
Oh, wow.
Aman endured severe physical abuse, suffering injuries that ultimately proved fatal.
I can't even imagine. I can't imagine the fear and pain
Absolutely.
he must have endured during that ordeal.
It's unimaginable.
Unimaginable.
And the fact that this went on within the supposed safety of a college campus makes it even more disturbing.
Right.
It's a complete betrayal of the trust that students place in these institutions.
After that brutal session, Aman managed to return to his hostel room. Was he able to get any help?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But that's the truly tragic part.
Right.
Despite his injuries, Aman didn't receive immediate medical attention. It wasn't until the next morning,
Oh, no?
when his condition worsened drastically,
Oh, wow.
that he was rushed to the hospital. By then, it was too late. He died on March 8th due to a brain hemorrhage,
Who's this?
a direct result of the injuries he sustained during the ragging session.
So this wasn't just some harmless hazing gone wrong. This was a deliberate and vicious assault
Yes.
that led to the death of a promising young man.
Yeah.
Did anyone face consequences for their actions that night?
Yes. And this is where we see the first signs of a potential turning point.
Okay.
Aman's death sparked an immediate investigation,
Okay.
and 4 senior students directly involved in the ragging session were arrested.
What were the specific charges they faced?
They were charged with culpable homicide not amounting to murder,
Okay.
a significant step that recognized the severity of their actions. This wasn't simply a case of boys will be boys anymore.
All
This
right.
was about holding individuals accountable for their brutality.
I can only imagine the outrage and the calls for justice that followed Aman's death.
It wasn't just outrage, it was a national awakening.
Wow.
Aman's death sparked protests across India,
Wow.
bringing the issue of ragging into the spotlight like never before. Students, parents, activists, everyone was demanding justice for Aman and a safer environment for all students. His case became a symbol of the need for systemic change.
So beyond the arrests, how did Aman's case actually change things in India? Was there any lasting impact?
Absolutely. Aman's death didn't just spark outrage, it ignited a movement.
Okay.
We saw the introduction of stricter anti-ragging legislation, a direct response to the public outcry and the need to hold institutions accountable.
What kind of changes did these new laws bring about? Did they actually have any teeth?
They did.
Yeah.
The new legislation imposed much harsher penalties for anyone involved in ragging,
Okay, good.
making it clear that this was no longer something to be taken lightly. It also established concrete accountability measures for institutions.
Okay.
The University Grants Commission, which oversees higher education in India,
Right.
made it mandatory for every college to establish anti-ragging committees and helplines,
Okay.
ensuring there were channels for students to report incidents without fear.
That sounds like a step in the right direction,
Yeah.
but did those measures really make a difference on the ground? Were students truly safer after these reforms?
That's a question we'll delve into further as we continue our deep dive.
Okay.
While the legislation was crucial, it was just the beginning.
We were just discussing the new anti-ragging legislation passed in the wake of Aman's death. It seems like a significant step forward,
Yeah.
but laws on paper don't always translate to real change, right?
Right.
Did these measures truly create a safer environment for students?
That's the question, isn't it? While the legislation laid the groundwork, the real test was in its implementation.
Okay.
The effectiveness of these anti-ragging committees and helplines really varied from one institution to another.
What factors influenced whether these measures were effective or not? Were some colleges more committed to change than others?
Absolutely. It ultimately came down to the will of each college administration. Were they genuinely dedicated to creating a culture where ragging was simply not tolerated? Did they empower these committees to act independently and take decisive action against perpetrators?
Right.
Or were these committees just for show? A way to appease public pressure without truly addressing the problem? Sadly, the latter was sometimes the case.
It's disheartening to think that some institutions might have just paid lip service to these reforms without truly embracing the need for change.
It is, and it highlights a crucial point.
Okay.
Legislation alone can't eradicate deeply ingrained behaviors. You need a fundamental shift in attitudes
Right.
and a genuine commitment from those in positions of power to create a safe environment.
So how did the Aman movement, started by Aman's father, factor into all of this?
Right.
Did they play a role in ensuring that the momentum for change continued?
Absolutely. The Aman movement has been instrumental in keeping the spotlight on the issue of ragging
Okay.
and pushing for continued reforms. They've acted as a powerful watchdog, ensuring that Aman's death wasn't in vain. They've advocated tirelessly for stricter enforcement of the anti-ragging laws, greater transparency from institutions, and a more proactive approach to prevention.
So they've been a force for accountability,
Exactly.
making sure that the conversation didn't just fade away after the initial wave of outrage.
Their work goes beyond just legal reforms. They've been actively involved in educating students and parents
Okay.
about the dangers of ragging, empowering them to recognize it as a form of abuse, and encouraging them to speak out against it.
That's so crucial. It's not just about punishing perpetrators after the fact, but about preventing these situations from arising in the first place.
Right.
Did this increased awareness sparked by Aman's case and amplified by the Aman movement actually lead to a decline in ragging incidents?
That's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to definitively answer. Data on ragging incidents is notoriously difficult to collect, partly because many incidents go unreported, especially when fear and a culture of silence prevail. Some studies suggest there has been a decline in reported cases, but the problem is far from eradicated.
So while progress has been made, the fight is far from over.
Precisely. We can't afford to become complacent.
Yeah.
Aman's legacy reminds us that this is an ongoing battle that requires constant vigilance, sustained advocacy, and a deep commitment to changing attitudes and behaviors within these institutions.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that still remain in tackling this issue? What are the roadblocks to creating truly safe and inclusive learning environments?
One of the biggest challenges is addressing the underlying power dynamics that allow ragging to thrive in the first place.
Okay.
Ragging is often seen as a twisted rite of passage, a way for senior students to assert their dominance over their juniors,
Right.
to perpetuate a hierarchy built on fear and intimidation.
It's about dismantling those unhealthy power structures that allow abuse to continue generation after generation.
Exactly, and that requires a multi-pronged approach. It's about education, about fostering a sense of community and respect among students,
Okay.
about empowering bystanders to intervene when they see something wrong, and about holding those in positions of authority accountable for creating a culture where ragging simply isn't tolerated.
It's about breaking the cycle.
Precisely. We need to move away from this outdated notion that ragging is just harmless fun or a necessary part of college life.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing it for what it truly is, a form of abuse that can have devastating, even fatal consequences.
Aman's case tragically illustrates the very real human cost of this pervasive issue.
It does. And his story, while deeply saddening, also offers a powerful message of hope. It shows us that one person's voice, one family's determination to seek justice and create lasting change can spark a national movement and have a real impact.
His legacy continues to inspire action and change.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that each of us has a role to play. Whether it's speaking up against injustice, supporting organizations like the Aman Movement, or advocating for safer and more inclusive environments in our own communities, we all have a part in ensuring that no other student suffers the same fate as Aman.
His story serves as a powerful reminder that silence allows abuse to thrive. We must continue to challenge these harmful traditions and hold institutions accountable for protecting their students. It's clear that the fight for justice and lasting change continues.
It does. Aman's case left an indelible mark on India's educational landscape. But the larger question remains, have we learned enough to ensure that such tragedies never happen again?
We've been discussing the impact of Aman Kachroo's case
Yeah.
and the ongoing efforts to combat ragging in India.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to this story we need to unpack.
Yeah,
The issue of institutional accountability.
right.
The college authorities knew about previous ragging incidents, yet they failed to take meaningful action. Why was that?
It's a question that haunts this case. Could Aman's death have been prevented if the college had taken a stronger stance against ragging? Had they created a culture where students felt safe reporting these incidents without fear of retaliation?
Right.
Sadly, it seems those in positions of authority turned a blind eye, perhaps to protect the college's reputation, or because they underestimated the severity of the problem.
It's almost as if they accepted ragging as an inevitable part of college life,
Yeah.
dismissing it as harmless pranks or boys will be boys behavior. But Aman's case tragically proves that that's not the case.
Exactly, and that points to a systemic failure.
Right.
Not just within that particular institution, but within a culture that tolerated this abusive behavior for far too long.
Yeah.
It raises serious questions about the responsibility of educational institutions to protect their students, not just from physical harm, but from the emotional and psychological trauma that ragging inflicts.
I wonder if there was also a sense of fear, a reluctance to challenge the established hierarchy within the college. Perhaps there was a feeling that confronting senior students, especially those from influential families, would create more problems than it solved.
That's a valid point. The power dynamics within educational institutions can be incredibly complex.
Yeah.
There's often a culture of deference to seniority, a reluctance to walk the boat or challenge those in positions of authority. But as we've seen, that silence can have devastating consequences. It allows abusive behavior to continue unchecked, putting countless students at risk.
So what lessons can we draw from this aspect of Aman's case? How can we ensure that institutions take their responsibility to protect students seriously rather than sweeping these issues under the rug?
I think it's crucial to shift the focus from reaction to prevention. It's not enough to simply punish perpetrators after an incident has occurred.
Right.
Institutions need to actively cultivate a culture of respect and zero tolerance for any form of harassment or abuse. That means clear policies, effective reporting mechanisms, and a commitment to thoroughly investigating every complaint.
It also requires empowering students to speak out, to feel confident that their voices will be heard and that action will be taken to address their concerns.
Absolutely. Students need to know that they have rights, that they deserve to feel safe and respected within their learning environment, and that they have allies within the institution who will support them. It's about creating an environment where silence is no longer the norm, where speaking out is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness.
So where does all of this leave us today? Looking back on Aman's case and the changes it sparked, what gives you hope? What makes you think that real progress is being made?
What gives me hope is the courage of individuals like Aman and his family who dared to speak out against injustice,
Yeah.
who refused to let his death be in vain. Their bravery ignited a national movement,
Right.
forcing India to confront a deeply ingrained problem. It led to legal reforms, greater awareness, and a shift in the conversation around ragging. That's a powerful testament to the impact that even one voice can have.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in building a world where education is truly a force for good, where every student feels safe, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential.
Exactly. And it's not just about educational institutions. It's about challenging these harmful power dynamics and cultures of silence wherever they exist. It's about speaking up against injustice, holding those in authority accountable, and creating a world where everyone can learn and thrive without fear.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a truly impactful case.
Thank you for having me.
We hope this conversation has shed light on the complexities of ragging, the long road to justice, and the importance of creating safe and inclusive environments for everyone. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today. We encourage you to continue learning about this issue, to engage in conversations, and to use your voice to advocate for positive change. If you found this deep dive insightful, please follow and subscribe to our podcast for more explorations of compelling cases and important issues. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, stay curious.